Hello everyone, this is Angela and welcome to my channel, Angie the ENTJ. Please be sure to like, subscribe, comment, and click on the notifications bell so that you'll know whenever I upload any new content. I want to take the time to thank the viewers, especially the subscribers, for your support, your comments. I read each and every last one of them, or at least I try to. And I like the different perspectives. Thank you as well for your patience while I worked on the final video about the natural hair movement, the details surrounding what we had accomplished, and the direction that we were going before it was hijacked. So thank you for all of your patience, your support. And you know what? This last final video has been quite difficult because I had an entire video that was nearly an hour and a half long, and I encountered problems uploading it to YouTube. So I abandoned it because I was up all day and part of the night working on it. And, you know, this morning, like I do normally, I usually begin my day with meditation and introspection. And during the course of it, I realized that my third attempt to create this video, what it ended up doing was encompassing my anger, my disappointment. I said a lot of things and named a lot of people because it was still shocking to me more than 25 years later. You know, the irreparable damage is evident until this day, and especially to those of us who were there from the beginning. So my anger was very much so justifiable. And I tried to upload this video. That is until I gained a bit of insight that came to me this morning. And that insight was just simply that we lacked the preparation for an element that we did not know was coming. We couldn't see it coming. Okay? It was one who Harriet Tubman, using her as an example, knew about very well and was prepared for it. For those of you who may not know who Harriet Tubman is, she was a formerly enslaved woman who led herself and hundreds of others to freedom on a network known as the Underground Railroad. The Underground Railroad is a phrase to describe a network of abolitionists who supported runaways through safe houses. Understanding the brutality faced by enslaved people of African descent in the antebellum South, certainly one could imagine that there would be numerous people rushing towards the direction of freedom. I am certain those who knew of Harriet Tubman felt like their prayers were answered when she gave them her telltale signal, which alerted others that she was around and ready to take her passengers onto another trip on the Underground Railroad to the land of freedom. And this was a very dangerous trip to embark upon. She had to carry a pistol, of course, to protect herself and her passengers against slave catchers who would return them back to the plantations that they were fleeing, and to a guaranteed torture session with public humiliation, and if they survived it, being sold further into the slave stronghold of the antebellum South. So it was understandable that Harriet Tubman had to carry weapons to protect herself and her passengers against these slave catchers who can earn a handsome reward upon the capture and return of runaway slaves. However, what is a shocking and inconvenient truth to many is when they learn that Harriet Tubman also had to pull the pistol on her own passengers. Yes. Think about it. These people have been in chains. They've experienced being tied to whipping posts and beaten. They got scars on their backs. Some of them have been branded. Women have been forcibly impregnated by the men who owned them. And then on top of that, their jealous mistresses abused them because of it. Yet, despite the horrors that they faced for many of them, this was all that they knew. They were born into it. It is an environment that was familiar to them. When I read through the slave narratives, there are stories about how life seemed to be harder for those who were emancipated at times after the war than before, because on their plantation they had received a predictable allotment of clothing, food, and they had slave cabins as shelter. However, once freedom came, these people now had to pay for the things that they used to be given, and this was challenging for some. Now, I understood when I read that aspect of the slave narratives, no one was talking about going back into becoming a slave. They were just commenting on how some things were challenging to them now that they didn't face before. And no one wants to go back to eating a slave's rations, eating the worst cuts of meat, getting the worst cuts of food. Nobody wants to go back to that. They were just simply commenting on, at least they could predict that something would come. Whereas in the realm of freedom, they were challenged by ensuring that something would come at the time. Okay? So Harriet Tubman, she was a dark skinned woman. And you know what? By the time she was a 10-year-old little girl, and her name was still Araminta Ross, she had been tied up and horsewhipped for the first time. Harriet Tubman saw, heard, and felt firsthand the cruelty of her oppression, literally from the time that she was born. Harriet Tubman prayed daily for God to change her cruel slave master's heart, and she did not see any results until she prayed for God to remove him out of the way, and then he passed away. So the first attempt that Harriet Tubman made was with her brothers, but it was a failed attempt because all of them turned back around due to understandable doubt and uncertainty. They got scared, and rightfully so. However, the next attempt, Harriet Tubman went alone and she succeeded. Then afterwards, she did the very thing that she became known for in history. She risked her own life and her own freedom to help others to secure theirs. And she experienced firsthand how doubt and uncertainty appeared when she and her brothers attempted to escape for the first time. So, these other times, Harriet Tubman was prepared. She had to take the pistol to use on the slave catchers, yes. But she also had to aim it at some of her passengers. Make no mistake about it, the fear of her passengers were very justified. There were unspeakable horrors that awaited them if they were caught. Their loved ones who were left behind on the plantations often suffered the penalties. They would be accused of assisting the runaways to flee, and they would be tortured for information about their escape, even if they had nothing to do with it. All of her passengers were keenly aware of this reality, and for some, the pressure was just too overwhelming. So much so that they would risk running back into the cruel familiarity of slavery before marching forward into the uncertainty of freedom. If Harriet Tubman did not point that pistol at them and force them to forge ahead into freedom, albeit against their own will, it would have risked the freedom and the lives of everyone else. No different than a fish is expected to swim and a dog is expected to bark. When it comes to people and freedom, there will always be those who will be more comfortable submitting to a cruel familiarity than those who are willing to embark on the foggy path to freedom. As far as who undermined and hijacked the natural hair movement, well, it's simple. QP, along with so many others, including myself, were a group of aspiring Harriet Tubmans in our own right. The shackles, the whips, and the chains and the auction blocks were very visible in Harriet Tubman's time, along with people who were so filled with fear that they would run back to the very plantations that violated their human rights on a regular basis. She could see the tug of this fear on her passengers. You see, the reality is that we who were a part of the original natural hair movement, we could not know what we were not able to see. And unlike Harriet Tubman, great esteemed ancestor, we were unable to see the fear on our passengers. Harriet Tubman had a pistol to aim at her passengers, who became frightened and forced them against their will into freedom. By no means am I suggesting that we should have aimed an actual pistol. However, looking backwards, and had we knew then what we knew now, we would have handled the new arrivals with an iron fist. Because it wasn't the core group. It was the ones that came much later. Unlike Harriet Tubman, who could see people panicking, could hear their murmurings and attempting to mutiny against her, and that allowed her to see what was going on and afforded her the opportunity to react, we were new to freedom ourselves, as far as being able to walk out with our natural hair and embracing our beauty as people of darker complexions. We did not recognize these characters in the natural hair movement because their fear was invisible. The fear showed up in the form of black women who had been, quote unquote, left behind. Beauty standards were becoming more inclusive and no longer was dominated by straight hair. It was no longer dominated by lighter complexions and European phenotypes. Now, I want to make it clear, when I say that it wasn't dominated by these features, it didn't mean that we saw ourselves as being supremacist over others. What we're saying is that Europeans were on level 10, light hair was on level 10, light skin was on level 10. Well, we're on level 10 too with our darker skin, our curlier hair, our darker features. So it's about a leveling, not being a supremacist one of the other. Okay, so for the black women who were left behind, and these were black women of all complexions, by the way, you know, they invested into this outdated way of life, and they were facing an existential crisis. The very system that lasted for hundreds of years up until this point was crumbling fast at the dawn of the 21st century. When these last arrivals came into our chats, what they witnessed blew their minds. The first thing that I know shocked them were the sheer number of women with straight hair who were heavily involved in the natural hair movement. I know that blew their minds. They were not expecting that one. But there it was, right in front of their faces. Because you see, there wasn't any good hair or nappy hair over here. There was 3A and 3B and 3C and 4A and 4B and 4C and combination hair, and it was all good, you know. There were no dark skin and light skin over here. There was vanilla, there was caramel, there was toffee, there was espresso, and not only that, with all the different shades, it even went so far as to, hey, there are cool undertones and neutral shades and warm undertones. So this wasn't the norm where we were leaving from, but it was the norm over here in the space that we created. There were black women who were swirling, and there were black women who were unboxed, meaning that, you know, we were free to do the things that quote unquote black people typically did not do without being made to feel weird or, you know, something was wrong with it. When black women who had been left behind, the last ones to know, when they finally showed up into the space, they saw queer women dialoguing with straight women about things that were not sexual in nature. Bear in mind that this was during the era of don't ask, don't tell, where a person could literally lose their job just because they're in the rainbow community. So this was a real risk. Most of the queer women went by pseudonyms, but they were in the chat too. So when the late arrivals, the black women who were the last to join the chat, came aboard, they found a situation unlike what they've ever seen before. Everyone was out in the open, and on top of it all, there were a growing number of non-black people in the chat. primarily white mothers with biracial daughters, they were there in the chat. Another demographic that was popping up were culturally black women who were not black through ancestry.
And we always interview a lot of different people, man. You know what I'm saying? Famous people.
Right.
People that's on the come up, people
Right.
that's rising.
Right.
But this is something that's new.
Right.
We interviewing a Korean lady that was raised by black folks from the South, likes fried chicken and catfish.
Loves
And her
it.
name's Cindy Wilson.
Like, for all you who don't know,
Was that a good? That was a
That
good.
was great.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, okay,
I
yeah.
guess he's trying to explain who you are. Like so
That was good. That was pretty accurate. I mean,
Right.
where's the lie? So I can't go against
right.
that.
For those who don't know, Cindy Wilson is an Asian young lady who's adopted at a young age by an African American family, correct?
Correct.
And you were brought up in Mississippi.
Jacktown.
Jackson,
Mississippi.
Ooh, Jackson, Mississippi is dangerous.
Yeah, #1 crime rate.
Is it really?
Check our set. That's
I'm back. So these newer arrivals were shocked to find a space that had long been established before they knew of its existence, where people function in ways that were fundamentally opposite to everything that they had known. Over here, we respected each other. Over here, every voice was heard. We promoted positivity. We squashed negativity even in the most minuscule form. We squashed it in an effort to create a dynamic that was free from oppression. Being educated, academically and or technically, was appreciated over here. Being accountable was a requirement, and being respectful was mandated. We disagreed at times, but we did not do the name calling, I'm going to take your man. We didn't do that kind of stuff over here. We realized that for those of us who sought relationships with men, there were plenty, and if you wanted to remain single, no judgment. We also accepted that queer women existed, and they made it clear in the space at the time that they too were not attracted to straight women. At this point in time, it made sense. It shocked a lot of us when we heard someone say it for the first time, and that was due to ignorant stereotypes that were common during the time. But that was the power of our group and giving everyone the opportunity to speak. I have spent days working on how to conclude this series. See, look. This previous video that I created was over 2 hours long. I have tried to pinpoint a tangible character that best describes the women who hijacked the natural hair movement, and the closest one that comes to mind is Rosa from the soap opera La Escrava Isaura. It's a Brazilian soap opera for those of you who are in the U.S., and I'm sure you probably have never heard of it, but shout out to the Afro-Latinos. It's very popular over there. And Rosa played the part of an enslaved woman who was highly privileged. She was a feared and hated villain that found herself disarmed at the moment that she and everyone else were emancipated by the new plantation owner who purchased their plantation. So, in other words, they were enslaved by a cruel plantation owner and cruel plantation overseers that would punish them for the slightest reason. And Rosa was on their side. But a new plantation owner comes through who happens to be an abolitionist. And upon buying the plantation, the first thing he did was to free everyone, including Rosa. So freeing everyone, giving them their freedom, disarmed Rosa's privileges. It dismantled the emancipation itself, dismantled the very network that supported Rosa's privileges, and instantly all the people that she once looked down upon were now free and equal to her. You see, the truth is this. There are two types of adults on this planet. There is the one who will embrace adulthood and are willing to confront all of the uncertainties that come with being a full-fledged adult. Then there are those individuals who will fight to remain suffocating within a vacuum sealed package filled with miserable people like themselves. They will avoid actualizing fully as an adult. They will fight you if you attempt to open the package and pop the seal to their comfort zone and bring in any fresh air. More often than not, those of us who embrace freedom will turn around and open the door for others, just like Harriet Tubman did, just like we did during the natural hair movement before it was hijacked. However, those who find themselves in a situation where there is a change to what they are familiar with, even when it's within the realm of chattel slavery, even if it's the purchase of chemicals that are known to cause the growth of tumors and cancers, they will fight you to keep you from changing the status quo, no different than some of Harriet Tubman's passengers who entertained thoughts of mutiny. And the cost? When I see that back at the turn of this century, the average cost of a new home in the U.S. was about $120,000 in the year 2000. Now, the cost of new homes are at least triple this amount. One thing that the natural hair movement attempted to address was the lack of assets within the community. This is just the beginning to the cost of the damages that resulted from the hijacking of natural hair movement, not counting the thousands of hours and the thousands upon thousands of dollars worth of free labor that went into this movement by professionals. Okay? No price can be placed on girls who were trafficked, on opportunities that were lost, and the division between people based on the very things that we manage to address, such as colorism, featureism, phenotypes, and so forth. If I could do it all over again, knowing what I know now, I absolutely would. And I'm sure that the majority of the women involved in the original natural hair movement can say the same. However, I strongly believe that if we had at the time possessed the insight of Harriet Tubman, we would have handled those hijackers sooner, and we would have done so with an iron fist. Those of us who enjoy peace and a drama-free life are slow to get involved with the brute tactics of adults who fail to actualize. And I get it, because it is a mature thing to do. I get it. You're giving people the space to mature in their own time, right? However, right now, these same people are out here smashing and grabbing in the nicer areas, aren't they? And what do you think it will take to make them stop? The same stuff that we're seeing with the smashing and grabbing is similar to what I witnessed with the hijacking of the natural hair movement. It got so bad that QP, remember QP was the white passing black woman who created the natural hair space where the movement began. And she was the major moderator of it, but there were others there too, including myself. QP sent an email to those of us who remained about shutting down the space permanently. And QP, being the sage that she is, she also did something that only someone as wise as she was could do. When she sent us that email letting us know that she was shutting down the space, she also included a link to a new AOL chat group. You know why? It was so that we can log in one last time, just like we used to in the good old days, so that we could feel that esprit de corps that was lost with the hijacking of the movement. We were in that space for hours, that one last time, until it was time to go. And then it was no more. There, we discussed so many things. And before she closed out the group, she let us end on a high note, so that we didn't feel so bad. We didn't feel like failures because we worked hard, we worked diligently to regain control, but it just became overwhelming. It became too much. She reminded us that we help to save lives because now Black women are aware of the health risks that are associated with using hair relaxers, whereas before we were truly blind to it. So on that note, this is the last video I'm doing about the natural hair movement and the fact that it was hijacked. I just felt that you all should know the truth. There was a group, and we were a decentralized and a nuanced movement where everyone had a voice and all shades, textures, features, and phenotypes of beauty were accepted without comparisons. I'm glad that I was there not only to witness, but to participate in it and experience firsthand the unity of women who decided to do whatever it takes to be free, and to be free by our own terms according to our own definition. So whenever I see you all out here embracing yourself as you are, whether it's a little girl with a dark complexion and 4C hair, pom-poms on her head, it brings me joy. Whenever I see a professional lady with toffee caramel complexion and no one is shocked about her appearance, it brings me joy. When I see people who used to hide their heritage as a protective mechanism, either hide the fact that they're mixed, hide the fact that they're biracial from Black people or white people, and now they're embracing who they are, especially their Blackness. They're embracing their Blackness. It brings me joy. And I know numerous of others, Blacks and non-Black alike, who were inspired by us. And when I see them, it does bring me joy. I know that there are many more of us who are against oppression than there are those who wish to live according to unearned privileges. Simply put, we need to be more vocal, and we need to stand more firmly in our position against oppression in any form. So that's all I have to say for now. Please be sure to like, subscribe, comment, and click on the notifications bell so you'll know whenever I upload any new content. Take care until next time.